Get ready for a hair-raising journey into the unknown. Broken Wolf tells the story of a woman caught up in an ancient tradition, a deadly secret, and a love that could save her or destroy her. This is Broken Wolf EP2. Thank you very much for your subscription and likes. You can leave your comments in the comments section 10. Considering they were in a deep dark forest that most people would be terrified of, Hunter finds drifting off to sleep incredibly easy. On the other hand, Isabella was scared out of her wits. Every single noise, whether that be a branch snap or an owl hooting, made her practically jump out of her skin. Isabella's neck was getting sore at it, snapping in the direction of every noise. She wasn't sure if this was because she expected 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 to suddenly appear or a giant bear. Are there giant bears in these woods? I should have asked if there are giant bears. Isabella thinks to herself, looking down at his relaxed form. He seemed so settled. He also looked much younger when he was asleep, just like he did when he smiled. Isabella so wanted to reach out and touch his face, but even she knew that would probably be creepy if it woke him up, so decided against it, and decided to rest her head against the tree she was leant up against. Isabella takes a deep breath and closes her eyes, trying to relax and push all scary thoughts out of her head. Sure, she was technically a werewolf, but she knew she would probably be useless if faced with real danger. Good job, Hunter was here. Isabella took a moment to make a wish, pleading for anyone who would listen to return her beloved cat. She knew nobody understood it, most of all Hunter, but that cat was her best friend. 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 had always been there. The person who listened to her cry and comforted her, the way nobody else had been willing to do since before 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐼𝐻 had died. Hunter's head lolled on Isabella's shoulder, making her jump slightly. She almost reached to push his head away, but instinct and maybe the mating bond already forming caused her to stay still. The contact, no matter how small, was somewhat comforting to Isabella, something that she had also not experienced since 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐼𝐻, particularly around men. They had been demonized to her in the past few years, but she could already see that being around Hunter and even the little contact with Jackson, that not all men were the same. It allowed her to believe that maybe one day she could be confident around men again. Isabella is pulled out of her deep thoughts by another rustling sound, making her head turn to her left. She watches with narrowed eyes as the rustling gets louder. Seconds pass in bated breath, and Isabella, feeling a newfound confidence, inches away from Hunter. But as the noise gets louder, she starts to feel terrified, and is ready to shake Hunter awake when a familiar ginger cat pops his head from around the bushes. Without thinking, Isabella jumps to her feet with tears in her eyes, causing Hunter to fall flat on his face on the floor. His eyes flutter open with a groan as he rubs his now aching head. Isabella heads towards 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠, ready to pick him, but at the last second, he turns on his heel and runs in the direction he came from. Isabella starts to chase close behind. Hunter jumps to his feet to follow. "Bloody cat," he grumbles angrily. The chase continues until 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 reaches a fallen tree. He nimbly climbs straight onto it with confidence. Isabella weighs up her options. The tree is surrounding with thick, dark mud, but the longer she stands at the base of the tree, the further 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 gets. She simply can't lose him. Shakily, Isabella climbs onto the tree and starts to try to walk across. Halfway across the tree, 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 sits down, patiently waiting for his owner to reach him. He somehow has a hilarious look on his face. Isabella could have sworn he was smiling at her, but now was not the time to think about that, as every extra step Isabella took, the shakier she became on her feet. Werewolves often have incredible balance, but a lack of training or practice meant this skipped Isabella. She was the complete opposite. She usually fell over her own feet, let alone trying to balance on a tree trunk. It wasn't long before Hunter caught up with Isabella. He watched her with an amused look in his eyes. There was some concern, but he was pretty confident that even if Isabella fell from the tree, apart from being very muddy, she wouldn't come to any harm. There was absolutely no chance Hunter was going to climb onto the tree himself. He told himself that he wasn't going to do it because one of them needed to be on dry land if Isabella happened to fall into the mud. Hunter watched on in confusion at how shaky Isabella was. It was basic training that most pack members did for balance. You built the basic foundations after shifting for the first time, usually 13/14, but it was something you were supposed to dedicate time to for the rest of your life to ensure something like this didn't happen. As much as it was endearing to watch Isabella, he had never seen someone with so little grace when doing such a simple task. Even some of the youngest werewolves would have already managed to reach 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 by now. As Isabella gets closer, 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠 stands ready to turn around and go further back along the tree trunk. "No, 𝐴𝐵𝐼𝑎𝑠!" Isabella yells in a panic. "Stay where you are. She begs, waving her arms around to show Tobias to stay still, but mainly to help with her balance. "Be careful, Isabella," Hunter shouts, biting the inside of his cheek nervously. On her next step, Isabella completely loses her balance. One leg goes up and her arms flail around before she crashes down to the side, falling spectacularly into the mud with a splat. A small scream leaves Isabella's mouth. This time Hunter has to bite his lip to stop himself from laughing. She wasn't hurt, and honestly, she just looked adorable. When Isabella managed to resurface from the mud, she has a smile on her face before breaking into laughter, which is music to Hunter's ears. Hunter lets out a laugh too as she struggles her way trying to get out of the mud. Tobias decides he has worried her enough and makes his way across the trunk towards Hunter with ease. He sits at Hunter's feet with a look of "Hurry up, what is taking so long?" to Isabella as she squelches her way out of the mud. Hunter finally takes pity on her and reaches his arm out for her to grab onto. Misjudging his strength, Hunter pulls too hard, causing not only Isabella to come flying out of the mud, but she lands right against his chest, leaving an Isabella-shaped mud patch over him, leaving them both laughing again. Heavy with mud, apart from Tobias of course, the three of them head back to the huge pack house/castle. Now wide awake and happy, Isabella finally can appreciate the beauty of her new home. A cold shiver spreads across her body, not only from the mud, but also because of the thought that this was her new home. Hunter pulls Isabella closer to him to share his body heat. He was like a permanent hot water bottle. Isabella and Hunter take their shoes off at the door, but it is almost futile as they still manage to leave a muddy trail in their wake. Isabella glances over shoulder and winces at the mud covering the floor. She starts to turn around to clean it up, but Hunter grabs onto her hand and pulls her towards him gently. "Someone will sort it," Hunter shrugs. Isabella feels uneasy, and although she doesn't say anything, it is written all over her face for Hunter to see. "Look, Isabella, I'm Alpha and you're their future, Luna. We need to focus on cleaning ourselves, not the floor. They will sort it." Isabella winces again. She wasn't sure she would ever get used to having so much freedom and control, but the one thing she knew for sure was that she would ensure that she or nobody around her ever treated someone the way she was for as long as she lived. The happy mood didn't end. Isabella barely registered that Hunter had started to peel the now drying muddy clothes off of her body. Hunter had only pure intentions of getting Isabella clean, dry and warm. He could even tell that she was relaxed, which he knew was unusual, so was enjoying the moment while it lasted. Despite her relaxation, Hunter ensured he told Isabella every step of the way what he was going to do next, giving her time to protest or stop him. He also made sure that for every piece of clothing he took off of her body, he did for himself to show they were on a level playing field. Hunter leads Isabella into the shower and watches as the mud starts to slide away from her pale skin. As if realizing what was going on, Isabella wraps her arms around herself awkwardly. In silence, Hunter reaches over and, looking into Isabella's eyes to watch for her reaction, he gently takes her arms from around her body. To ensure she doesn't feel exposed, he pulls her against his chest. He runs his nose along the length of hers, letting the water cascade over them both before he washes them, both with soap. "You move quick," Isabella whispers with a small smile on her face. Although this was moving quicker than she had ever expected, it didn't feel wrong or bad to her, and she welcomed it. "Only as quick as you want, baby," Hunter replies, planting a soft kiss on her lips, but pulls away to make sure he doesn't cross the line. It was hard to know where the line was with someone as secretive as Isabella, but Hunter was dedicated to making sure she felt happy and safe. Smile cover both Isabella's and Hunter's face until Hunter separates himself from Isabella to reach over for the shampoo to clean her hair. He looks down and his eyes linger on numerous scars, too many to count. Some scars had a faded, healed look, while others look as fresh as a week ago. Despite Werewolf healing, any injuries that caused scars took much longer to leave the body. Hunter feels a pain in his chest that he never had before, almost as if a knife was plunging into it. He drops to his knees and wraps his arms around her waist. He didn't truly know what he was doing. He had never been faced with this before. As if clicking back into reality from her happy place moments before, Isabella rips herself out of his grasp and looks at him in horror. How was it possible to not even realize that he would see them? How could he have such an effect on her that she could barely think of anything other than him? Isabella quickly turns on her heel to escape the enclosed shower that suddenly seemed far too small, making her panic. As she walks away, it gives Hunter the chance to see the scratches and cuts on her back, which make him feel nauseous and furious at the thought of hurting someone so pure as Isabella. "Who did that to you?" she hears Hunter yell over the roaring water above his head. Isabella said nothing and did not turn around. If she had, she would have seen the pure red eyes on Hunter as the anger was flooding his veins, making him shake. 11. Isabella didn't think she could get ready as quick as she did after walking out of the shower. The bubble of happiness that they both had been in had been burst when Hunter had seen the scars on Isabella's torso and back from her old pack, mainly Finn, but she was scared to tell Hunter who his was because it would cause so much trouble that she just wanted to forget. All the trauma had been something Isabella dealt with when it happened, and although she would never completely forget it, she pushed it to the back of her mind, never to be brought up again. But if Hunter knew who did it, it would be brought up again. By the time Hunter had managed to stand up, take a breath to calm himself down, put some sweatpants and a t-shirt and walk into his bedroom, Isabella had thrown on one of Hunter's tops with a towel over her lap as she sits patiently on the bed, her eyes to the floor in embarrassment. Hunter walks over to Isabella and kneels down again with his hands firmly pressed to her knees, not to hurt her but to keep her there so he can properly speak to her. "Look at me," Hunter begs, and when Isabella silently refuses, he reaches out and gently lifts up her chin so she is looking straight into his eyes. Despite wanting to look away, Isabella knows she will not achieve anything by doing that. "What did they do to you?" he asks, scooping Isabella's small hands into his big ones before bringing them up to his mouth to kiss gently. "It's in the past, please forget it," Isabella whispers, a stray tear slipping out her eye. "If it was in the past and forgotten about, you wouldn't be crying," he says, almost feeling smug but knowing it wasn't the right time for that. "I didn't have many friends in my old pack. Can we just leave it at that?" Isabella sighs, finally looking away from Hunter, who has to close his eyes to calm himself down and get rid of the bright red rings in his eyes to show anger, as he didn't want Isabella to think that he was angry at her. Hunter reaches out with a small smile on his face, which instantly calms him down when he sees his mate in his t-shirt. He lightly grips the hem of the t-shirt and starts to pull it up, but Isabella's eyes instantly widen and she jumps further onto the bed out of his reach. The reaction he had has been the worst thing of the whole experience. Even the pain they had happened didn't feel as bad as she did at that moment. "What have they done to you?" Hunter whispers, his words hoarse due to the lump in his throat. This was the closest Hunter had come to crying since he was a child. Crying was seen as a weakness, but he couldn't hold it back when it concerned his mate. Plus, it was better for her to see him cry than break something out of anger, because that would only scare her. Isabella brings her knees to her chest and stares forward blankly, but soon enough there is something in her line of vision, a hand. Hunter's hand. He is sat on the edge of the bed, not getting too close because he doesn't want to scare her, but he is holding out his hand for her to take. A panic forms itself in Isabella's stomach, and for a couple of minutes she curls up tighter, her eyes flicking from Hunter's face and his hand. When it comes back to her that Hunter her mate and he wouldn't hurt her, Isabella slowly slides her legs down and scoots down the bed until she can reach out and put her tiny hand into Hunter's large one. Hunter gently pulls her hand towards him. At first, there is a look of shock and fear that fills Isabella's eyes, but once she has pressed Hunter's chest, she looks comfortable and at home, like she belongs there. A small smile finds its way on both of their faces, Isabella because she realizes this is the man she has been waiting for so long, and Hunter because Isabella is finally relaxing as she closes her eyes and smells his scent, which is comforting to her. Hunter rocks them back and forth almost like Isabella is a child, and her small frame and lack of weight almost felt like a child. What felt like no time at all, she had fallen asleep, but before Hunter put her into the bed, he noticed a wet patch on his t-shirt where she had been crying, but he wasn't sure if she had done it before she went to sleep or after, but the anger that he had pushed down for Isabella's sake came back up. The last gentle thing that Hunter did for the night was place Isabella in the bed before placing a quick kiss on her forehead before walking to door. Hunter switches the light off and stands there for a couple of minutes just watching Isabella sleep. She looked peaceful, like she didn't have a care in the world, but as soon as Hunter remembered the reality of the burden she had been carrying about and what someone had done, he slowly closed the door and walked downstairs, calling his 3 most trusted pack members to his office for a meeting. "I've called you here because I want to send an invite to 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐿𝐴𝐺 and his brothers to come here too. Talk," Hunter says with a sadistic smile that made everyone but Jackson shrink back nervously. They knew he meant business, and seen as his mate had just come from that pack, it wasn't going to be anything good. "And when they get here?" Hunter, best warrior and friend, asks. "We treat them like guests of honor, of course," Hunter replies, his smile growing. "What is they don't want to come?" "They refuse." The last man, Hunter's advisor, who he never listened to, and fellow friend, asked. "Give them an offer they can't refuse, and if that doesn't work then you threaten them with death." Hunter shrugs like it's nothing. "Go." "Jackson, stay here," Hunter adds, shooing the other two men with his hand, his beta and best friend slumping down in a chair across from the desk. "So what's really going to happen when they get here, and what has actually happened?" Jackson says, knowing his best friend too well. "I'm not totally sure what's happened yet, but I will find out, and I don't think it's going to end happily," Hunter replies, shaking his head, not wanting to explain further, which Jackson understands, so just simply nods. 12. 2 slightly awkward days had passed for Isabella. Hunter had tried to start conversations about the previous night, but whenever he did, Isabella would quickly shut him down, telling him that she didn't want to talk about it, even though part of her was dying to tell him everything so that he could understand why she was so scared and jumpy around him. Isabella wanted to tell him so that he could understand how she felt, even though it was so hard to say it, to get them words out. Despite this, everything seemed good. There were some strange looks from other pack members who hadn't been properly introduced to Isabella, and some whispering behind her back, but it was nothing that hadn't happened before, and this time there was a huge difference. Of these whispers were about who Isabella was, unlike back in her old pack, as they would make up rumors about it, whisper about where she had got the most recent black eye, or about the fact that nobody wanted her there. It wasn't like she wanted to be there either. One thing that Isabella had noticed was that now she was doing nothing all day. She was more tired than ever. It was her choice to stay in bed until 8 a.m. every morning, which was a lie-in for her. And then, because of her role within the pack, she had not duties to do so. She ate and slept, yet she found herself wanting to have naps throughout the day. Maybe it was just because she knew she could. There would be no one storming in to pull her off of the bed by her hair, screaming at her to wake up, like she has experienced in the beginning when she wasn't used to the tough work schedule. It could also be because she had no work to do. When she had something to do, she didn't have time to think about being tired, because that would slow her down, and just like falling asleep, being too slow would also get you a punishment. It could also simply just be because of the fact that the bed she shared with Hunter, the one she seemed to spend most of her time on, was so damn comfortable and inviting. Isabella had woken up that morning to the soft humming of Hunter in the shower. Every now and again he would sing along to a line of a song that was playing through the speakers in the bathroom. Lying completely still, Isabella had curled up into a ball to listen, unable to stop the small smile on her face from growing. She could get used to waking up like this. This was certainly the case when Hunter had gotten out of the shower in nothing but a towel hanging dangerously low around his waist. Shaking her head, she made herself forget the thoughts she was having about him and the thoughts about the shower they had shared. Well, the good parts anyway. They had both gone for breakfast, and then Hunter had pressed a light kiss on Isabella's head before disappearing into his office to get some pack work done. There had been a large circle of people surrounding her instantly after the Alpha had moved, wanting to know more about her. But she still didn't feel totally comfortable around so many wide eyes wanting to know every inch of her life, particularly when she couldn't even talk to her beloved mate yet. Feel the high level of uncomfortableness and panic radiating from the kitchen/dining room area. Hunter had reappeared. He placed a guiding hand on Isabella's elbow to lead her upstairs, with his other hand clutching a laptop. Once they had left the room, they could both hear everyone erupting into excited giggles, as they all thought they knew what their Alpha had removed his mate for, when it couldn't be further from the truth. It was true that even Omega Wolves were constantly wanting to be with each other. As soon as they met their mate, this was just heightened the higher up the pack you got. And boy, was Hunter feeling it. Because the need for little pups was more important for future betas and alphas. "I knew you didn't want to be in there, so I thought I would get you out." He smiles lovingly down at his beautiful doe-eyed mate. "Thank you, I promise I'll get better." Isabella smiles back, although her cheeks burn a bright red color. "You don't need to. You're Luna," he adds comfortingly. "Exactly," Isabella says with a small laugh, to which Hunter adds his large deep one before leaning over to kiss her gently. Although he was cautious with her before because of how she acted, he was much more gentle now because he knew something had actually happened and she wasn't just nervous of her own accord. As much as he wanted to carry on, he pulled away with a small groan. "I need to do work," he sighs before closing eyes for a second to calm down. "Oh yeah. Of course, you go get your work done." Isabella rushes, feeling her cheeks warm up even more than ever. "Did he just turn me down?" she thought to herself, but she just quickly walked over to the bed to sit on it. "Well, I brought this up for you to keep you entertained. I will see you soon, princess," he says after calming down before rushing out of the room so he doesn't stay with her when he is meant to be doing work. Curling up under the covers, Isabella put on Netflix to watch a movie, but it wasn't long before she had fell into a deep slumber. Disorientated and eyes still full of sleep, Isabella shot out of bed. The open curtains revealed the sun had not long set and there was a lilac tint in the sky. For a moment she had forgotten what had made her wake up so suddenly, but a small sniff of the air revealed to her what she had feared. It was something she prayed she would never have to experience again. People she prayed she would never have to experience again, but yet here they were in her home. The home she can come to love already at the thought of them never contaminating it. Isabella's bubble had burst. Like a sharp needle they had come bursting through to pop it. Any shred of happiness for the short time she had been her seemed to melt out of her, mostly through the tears streaming down her face that she hadn't even noticed that were there. Pulling herself together, as much as she could, Isabella blew her nose and splashed cold water onto her face to try to mask the fact that she had been crying, but she could already feel herself on the edge. Some touch and she would go flying off into a mess of tears and screaming, yet putting her head high and shoulders back she opened the what seemed to be a much heavier door than before, because she, of course, didn't want to go, but she did. Isabella left the bedroom to go downstairs where she knew her old alpha and brothers were waiting. Isabella had to force each foot in front of the other as she walked down the stairs, every fiber of her body screaming to turn and run in the opposite direction back in the room to the comfort of the bed she had not long woken up from. Everything about the house that she has come to admire now seemed stained and tarnished at the thought of them being here, them touching it. Although part of Isabella was wondering what they were doing, she wasn't panicking as much as she thought she would. She knew they wouldn't be here for a fight, because although she hated them, she knew they were not stupid. They thought strategically and tactically, and by coming to the biggest alpha in the world for a fight is something they just wouldn't do. Isabella was more confused than anything about why they would be here. Hunter knew something had gone back in the old back. Sure, he didn't know the full extent, but he loved Isabella, so surely he wouldn't invite them for a visit. Looking around, everything seemed to be functioning normally. Nobody seemed concerned that a new smell was lingering around the house, so it seemed Hunter had warned them someone was coming, because otherwise, they would be extremely territorial right now. Stopping a girl that Isabella had seen around the pack that seemed pretty nice, she asked where he was. "Oh, in his office. I heard him mention something earlier about you being asleep and to do something when you woke up, so he probably wants you to go straight in," she smiles comfortingly. Unsure whether she wanted to go in or not, Isabella crept towards the door of his office. Isabella could hear low but growled talking from outside the thick wooden door and instantly knew there was tension in the room. They reached out a small shaky hand to knock on the door with. It seems almost instant that the door was aggressively swung open by Jackson, who tries to stand in the full frame of the door so you can't see what is going on inside, but with Isabella's height she can see between his arm where Hunter has Alpha Axel by the throat pinned up against the wall while he is getting right in his face. Isabella can also see on the other side of Jackson that Finn is sat with a straight face trying to not show his emotions, but she can see the fear in his eyes, and part of her loves it because that's exactly how he made her feel every single day, but she knew that was her. Isabella was a loving girl who wanted peace and not war. She knew what she had to do. "Hunter, stop," she said with a small but effective voice, because Hunter's head whipped round to look at her. He looked straight into her large eyes and dropped his hand from around Axel's neck. Pushing straight past Jackson, who clearly let her past, she went to walk over to Hunter, but as she got into the middle of the room she looked down at Finn, who had seemed to regain a large proportion of his confidence. Even now, when she knew she was 99% safe, that 1% was the thing that stopped her in her tracks and made a lump form in her throat as her heartbeat got much quicker, which she knew Hunter could hear. "It's him?" Hunter growled, and before Isabella knew he had moved, he had gone from one side of the room, from one brother to the other on the other side of the room. Hunter had Finn by the throat like he had Axel only seconds ago. "I'm going to kill you. Tear your limbs from your body and make your brother fucking eat them," he screamed, spraying spit into the suddenly small-looking boy's face. Axel had tried to run over to his baby brother, but was held back by two men who Isabella had seen with Hunter before, but she didn't know them by name. Finn let a blood-curdling scream as Hunter was literally pulling his arm away from his body. He had only managed to pull Finn's arm from the socket when Isabella rushed over. She placed a comforting hand on Hunter's arm. "He isn't worth it. You don't want him on your conscience," she says, a stray tear slipping down her face. A tear she didn't even know was coming. Isabella just needed these men out of her life. They were a part of her past, so they didn't need to be brought into her present or her future. "I won't even remember his name. This isn't new to me." Hunter smirked over his shoulder at the other men as they laughed. This was the first time Isabella truly saw a side in Hunter she hated. Stepping back, she was shaking her head. In that moment Hunter reminded her of Finn, and that scared her. Hunter looked over at Isabella's face, and seeing the terrified look, he actually let go of Finn, who slumped to the floor clutching to his arm. Rushing over to Isabella, Hunter placed a hand on her cheek which she pushed away. More tears were spilling over eyes. Isabella was more hurt about how Hunter was acting than the years of abuse she had been keeping a secret. "Baby," Hunter mutters, reaching out for her again, but she continues to move backwards. "No. You want to prove to me that you're no different to them? Let them go, I don't want them here any longer, but they have a pack to run." Isabella sighs before walking out of the room. "A pack who didn't help you? Let him kill them both. Kill them all," Isabella's wolf hissed. She herself seemed to have a violent side. Isabella knew she would get her revenge, whether it be through physical fight or simply through her happiness that she was told she would never get. Either way it would happen. They would never have the same control over her as they had done just a few weeks earlier. Coming into the bedroom around an hour later, Hunter was cautious about where he sat in regards to where Isabella was and how to approach a conversation with her. "They're gone," Jackson escorted them to the perimeter, not a hair on their head taken and uninjured. He explains, trying to scoot closer to Isabella, who is frozen, sat upright with legs out on the bed facing forward. "Apart from the injuries they sustained while they were here, apart from the mental injuries they got when they thought you were going to kill them," she points out, to which he can't really argue with because he did those things. "But they hurt you. I can't believe they hurt you," he says, growing angry again, but this time she reaches out and places a small hand on top of his large one. "Yes, and I'm the one that had to suffer then and suffer now. I hate the way I look with these scars, and I know you mustn't like to see them. I am scarred and ruined," she says, tears streaming down her face. Hunter stands up and walks to her side of the bed after closing the curtains and locking the door. He holds out his hand for her to take, which after a small hesitation she does. "What are we doing?" she asks, but Hunter doesn't say anything. All he does is plant a needy kiss on her lips. It is gentle but so full of emotion. He only breaks the kiss to unbutton Isabella's jeans and pull them down before lifting her small body up so he can kick them to the side. "I'm not ready," she panicked, but he presses his index finger to her lips. "Trust me?" he whispers, and she nods. Not sure why, but she knows she trusts him. Put both hands on either side of her face, Hunter kisses her again. This time it is much faster, so soon he has to stop to make sure he doesn't take it any further because he himself knows that she isn't ready. Reaching down, Hunter pulls Isabella's top from right over her head, leaving her in just underwear. Feeling the unease radiating from her, Hunter takes off his top and pants too. Hunter sits Isabella on the edge of the bed, then kneels down on the floor between her legs. He takes her foot first and inspects it. "I love you from the tip of your toes to your cute button nose," he whispers, rising until he manages to kiss to her nose. "That was cheesy." She giggles softly, which is music to his ears. "But it made you smile," he grins, but she freezes when places his hands on her lower stomach over her scars. "I love these too." He starts, but she tries to move, but before she can, he grabs her ankles and keeps her there while he places soft gentle kiss from one side of her stomach to the other. "You're lying," she mutters with an awkward look on his face. "No, baby. They're your battle scars. Or journey scars. It shows the long journey you had to take to get to me, and each one," he explains as his fingers run over each scar so lightly that she isn't even sure he is touching her until she looks. "Reminds me that you're here. You're mine forever, and that this isn't some dream I'm going to wake up from, because I don't want to lose my perfect girl," he whispers, pressing another needy kiss to Isabella's lips. 14. Hunter had woke up with his arms tightly wrapped around his beautiful mate's waist. He could sense that she was awake, but when he looked over her shoulder at her face, he noticed she was thinking about something so deeply that she hadn't noticed him watching her. Without saying anything, Hunter pulled Isabella closer to his body, which pulled her out of her thoughts with a small smile. Looking over her shoulder, Hunter took his chance to place a loving kiss on her lips, to which the smile on her lips grows. "I like when you smile," Hunter mutters, reaching out to trace his index finger over Isabella's bottom lip. "Me too," she whispers, closing her eyes as if to savor the feeling of Hunter's skin against hers. "Come," he replies, standing up. Isabella stretches out on the bed, not wanting to move. She has found the perfect warm spot of where Hunter had been lay moments earlier. Noticing she didn't want to get up, Hunter walked into the bathroom and started the shower before coming back into the bedroom, where he lifted Isabella up bridal style. He carried her into the bathroom before placing her on the heated floor. "Let's shower," Hunter said, taking a step forward, causing Isabella, with panic-stricken eyes, to take a step back, even though it was in the direction of the shower. "I'm not ready," she said, like she had the night before. Now it was time for Hunter to repeat himself. "Trust me," He smiles warmly, holding out his hand, which Isabella takes much quicker this time. Hunter pulls Isabella towards the shower slowly, never taking his eyes off of her. He walks into the shower still wearing his pajama bottoms and tank top. Hunter loved to sleep naked or at the most in just his boxers, but he knew this would make Isabella uncomfortable, so he had invested in some itchy pajamas but could only manage to wear the pants. "Are you crazy?" Isabella said, letting out a giggle despite stepping closer and closer to the shower herself. "Crazy for you?" He winks, making her blush despite how corny that line was. Isabella found herself walking into shower, and her clothes instantly got heavier as they filled with water. Hunter took his top off and let it fall to the floor of the shower. He then removed Isabella's pants slowly. He continued his eye contact, silently telling her she could say stop whenever she wanted, but she shook her head so he could continue. Connecting their hands back together, Isabella stepped out of the sodden pajama shorts and underwear, leaving her lower half. Despite this, she still felt comfortable with how she was, but she knew as soon as Hunter reached for her own tank top, she would be filled with anxiety. "Don't feel like you have to do anything." Hunter smiles reassuringly, and Isabella knew he was telling the truth, but it was like the hand that wasn't linked with Hunter's was frozen at her side, and she couldn't take her top off. Hunter made the next move and shimmied out of his pants that he stepped out with ease. Isabella couldn't help but let her eyes wander down. "Down, may I?" Hunter asks, pushing the straps of Isabella's top down only a fraction up. Isabella's eyes filled with fear in an instant that hurt Hunter. She felt so unhappy about what he would think about her that she was terrified. Not to mention it physically hurt his heart at how much his mate hated herself, the body he had come to love. Every inch, curve and scar was imprinted on his heart, and he just wished she would see what he did. "You have to trust me, Bella," he mutters, liking the way his new nickname for her rolled off of his tongue. Reaching behind her, Hunter gently tugged the hairband from Isabella's hair, letting waves of hair tumble down around her shoulders. "I do," she replies over the roaring water hitting their bodies. Even with the distraction of the shower, she couldn't even fully convince herself when it came to letting him see her body, never mind convincing Hunter. Without another word, Hunter pulled Isabella's body to his. By doing this, he gave himself just enough room to slide the top from her body, unhook her bra and take it off without actually seeing anything. Of course he wanted to. He loved her and wanted to know every part of her body, even if he already loved it, but he also knew he needed to take small steps and eventually he would get his girl. For a long time the two of them stood pressed to each other with the water hitting them without actually touching. But then Isabella slid her hands up Hunter's back to wrap them around him while he reached behind her head to comfortingly run on hand down her neck and upper back over her hair. It took Hunter a couple of minutes to realize Isabella was crying. He took a tiny step back so he could lift Isabella's chin up to look at her properly. "What is wrong?" he asks, already knowing. He could feel it radiating from her and his wolf and amp. Hers were talking about what was wrong, even though she too was mostly a closed book. "I don't want to be like this. I want to make you happy because I can show you my body. I want to feel like we could go on holiday to a sunny country, and I could wear a bikini so we could walk together, and you would be proud to call me your mate." She sighs, closing her eyes, but she opens them when Hunter places both of his hands either side of her head to cup her face. "Want to know something?" he asks with a hint of a cheeky smile on his face. "I have the most beautiful mate in the world and you're mine to love and cherish, so I don't want you to wear bikinis because then all the guys would stare wishing that what's mine was theirs, and I don't think I want to be beating up guys everywhere we go, plus I am proud. Prouder than you will ever even know. I can't explain it. I can't put how I feel about you into words because there isn't any words that will do you justice, but I am going to live every single day of my life trying to make you realize how much I care about you and how proud I am of what you have achieved in life. Life has dealt you a shit hand at cards, but you won. You defeated all odds, and yet you are the most compassionate girl I know with the biggest heart, and for that alone you are the one for me. I don't want anyone else. I want you, your scars, your past, yours, warts and all." He winks. "I do not have warts," Isabella giggles, punching Hunter playfully on the arm, feeling so much better. Of course there was doubt niggling its way through Isabella's brain, but there always would be. She needed to realize that Hunter wouldn't be here if he didn't feel the things he said he did. "But I still love you," Hunter smirks before leaning down to rest his head lightly on Isabella's shoulder. He didn't expect her to say it because he wasn't sure if she was ready. "I love you too," she whispers. Even some werewolves wouldn't have heard, but with his amazing hearing, Hunter's head whipped up straight. "What?" he asks with wide, excited eyes. Taking a shaky breath, Isabella said it again. "I love you too." Unable to help himself, Hunter pressed his lips heavily on Isabella's lips. There was sparks flowing through the two of them as they couldn't keep their hands off of each other. It was true. They really did love each other, and it was the first time Isabella felt truly like things might be okay. This feeling was to be short-lived. 15. The next day Isabella and Hunter were lay arm in arm on the bed after waking up. With sleep still in her eyes, Isabella turned on her front to look up at Hunter with love clouding her eyes. She found herself running a single finger up and down his chest, which left him growling softly. It almost sounded like he was purring appreciatively like a cat. Without another thought, Hunter's hand reached out quickly to place a steadying hand around Isabella's wrist to stop her light teasing. "I need to tell you something," he muttered, stretching with a groan. Anxiety filled Isabella's body. There was no tone in his voice that could tell what exactly Hunter needed to tell her, but as always Isabella thought of the worst possible scenarios first. "Go ahead," she whispers, digging her head into her pillow as if to cover her face from Hunter. She knew he could read her like a book, and right now she just wanted to find out what he needed to tell her rather than him having to spend an hour convincing her it wasn't anything bad, even though he could just be telling her. "It's my sister," he sighs, rubbing his face. Isabella sat up instantly with her head to the side, which Hunter found incredibly cute, but he had to shake his head as if to get rid of the thought. Likewise, Isabella found herself studying her mate's feature. The curves and creases of his face that she had come to know and love. She wanted nothing more than to reach out just to touch his face, but she luckily managed to keep her hands pinned to her side. "Sister? Since when did you have a sister?" Isabella says, sounding like she was questioning herself more than him. Had he mentioned it before, and she hadn't been paying attention? Hunter looks amused when he thinks about his answer. "I don't know, I guess since she was born, so 18 years. You knew what I meant." Isabella smirked, slapping Hunter's chest, trying to ignore the sparks all over her hand. Isabella took this moment to realize how close the two had become in 2 days. She didn't fear touching him now. The thought of even playfully slapping Hunter like she had done moments earlier when she first arrived terrified her. Isabella also noticed that she was okay that Hunter didn't have a top on. He slept with only pajama bottoms on. She knew he didn't even wear boxers underneath, but she was okay with it. Looking down at her own body, Isabella noticed she was wearing less too. Pajama shorts that made her legs seem endless and her usual tank top, but she noticed it had risen from moving around, and although the desire was there to pull it down to cover the faint silver markings of the start of her scars, she managed to refrain, which was a huge step for her. A chuckle vibrated its way through Hunter's chest and onto Isabella's hand, which had stayed firmly planted on his chest. Hunter had taken her hand and pressed it to his lips before putting it back on his chest with his on top. It so happened that it had fallen on his heart, and every now and again when Hunter would take a moment to admire Isabella, his heart would speed up a little, then slow back down again. "Okay, so what about your sister?" Isabella asks, scooting closer to Hunter to rest her head on his chest, which makes him smile as he runs his fingers comfortingly through her hair. Isabella wasn't the only one who had noticed the change between them both. "She's found out about you. I tried to keep it quiet because she can be a bit much, let's say, and I wanted you to feel comfortable here before she came bounding home, but anyway she's found out, and she is on her way home. I just wanted to warn you," he explains. "It's her home, you don't need to tell me, it's okay." Isabella smiles, resting her chin on Hunter's chest so she can look up at him. "It's your home too, plus she has something to tell me." He grimaces, "And?" Isabella giggles. "What could be so bad?" "Isabella, she has a bad reputation. Leila isn't at the pack because my dad thought she gave us a bad name, so he sent her to France to go to a nun school." He says, stifling a laugh, that she had to go and not him. "A nunnery? That must suck." Isabella grimaces at the thought. She lasted 3 days there before running away. She ran away a total of 18 times in 7 months before even the women of God gave up on her, so Dad told her he didn't want her back. Hunter explains but chuckles at the horrified look on Isabella's face. Although she was treated so poorly, there is usually a strong connection between real parents and their children, particularly in the werewolf world, so she couldn't understand why their dad told his daughter he didn't want her back. "Oh, don't look like that, Bella. Of course he wanted her back, but he wanted to scare her a little by thinking that she was on the brink of being rogue. Thought it would straighten her up a little, make her grow up, so he punished her by sending out thousands of pounds out to her and her own personal bodyguard," Hunter says, rolling his eyes and shaking his head. "Some punishment," Isabella said, wishing she has been sent away to do as she pleased. "Exactly, now she wanders around the world as she pleases, spending the pack's money. Mom and Dad have even bumped into her in their travels," Hunter says in an almost jealous tone. "But why wouldn't he? All of his family have been able to do as they want. His sister will have never been too important, so she was always free to do what she wanted, and now his mother and father were only former alpha and Luna sure they would help out if needed by they didn't need to be at the pack anymore, so they could go out and travel while Hunter was stuck being the most powerful alpha in the werewolf world. He couldn't even go on a holiday. If he went on a trip it would be business, not to relax. You don't regret being alpha though, right? Isabella asks, and Hunter looks as though he is hurt by that question. Of course not. I wouldn't change it for the world, and our time will come when we can travel and leave the kids behind. He smirks while Isabella's eyes widen with fear. Kids. So now do you understand why I'm worried? Announcements from Leila are never good. Wouldn't surprise me if she got herself pregnant, Hunter spits, the black look of anger taking over his eyes. Brother dearest, came a small, almost innocent-sounding voice. Isabella and Hunter turn around at the same time to see a small framed, blonde-haired, beautiful girl stood in front of them. There was no doubting the family resemblance between them despite some of the larger differences. Leila had heavy makeup even though anyone could tell that she didn't need it, and underneath it Isabella could see that it was just a girl looking for attention. And if that attention had to be bad, then so be it. Leila. Hunter replies with a curt nod. Isabella couldn't grasp why he was being so formal with his own flesh and blood despite why he had told her, "I'm 𝐖𝐨𝐷𝐷𝐷." Isabella starts but is cut off. Isabella, hiya. Leila smirks roughly, pulling her into a tight hug. Careful, Hunter growls. And so it begins. 16. So why are you here? Hunter asks with narrowed eyes. Almost as soon as Isabella had been introduced to Leila, Hunter had barked orders at everyone, including the two most important girls in his life, making them follow him to his office. Hunter had sat down in his chair while Leila fell down into a chair across the desk like she had done it 1,000 times, Isabella thought, but then when she thought back to what Hunter had told her about Leila, she probably had fell into that exact chair at least 1,000 times. Didn't get the decorators in when you became alpha then? She sneers with a smirk. It's hard for Isabella to distinguish what is a joke and what isn't because Leila's speech is borderline insults and jokes from a teasing, annoying younger sister. Why are you here, Leila? Hunter asks, ignoring her verbal punch. I told you, the day you dropped those whores and found your real mate I would come visit, she grins, glancing between her big brother and his now disgusted mate. Isabella felt her stomach turn and a lump in her throat restricting her ability to breath. Whore? Isabella hadn't fully expected Hunter to wait for her as he was years older than her, and might have thought he never would find his mate, but there had been multiple girls and not serious relationships? Just one-night stands? A warning growl leaves Hunter's mouth as his eyes burn red simply from the reaction of Isabella. He could see the hurt on her face. Usually, he would ignore everything his sister said, even things like that when there were people in the room they were his closest friends like Jackson, his best friend, and Beta. Jackson was there now looking strangely uncomfortable, but like Hunter, it wasn't because of what Leila had said, it was because of the look of betrayal on Isabella's face. Jackson had been by Hunter's side through his worst times where he was sleeping with a different girl every night, and he was there now though his best times with Isabella at his side. Why are you so angry, Hunter? You told Isabella about your past, didn't you? Isn't that what you do with mates? You share everything? She asked with wide, innocent eyes that no one believed to be true. Leila looks up at Isabella, who forces a small smile on her face despite the quick, anxiety-filled breaths she was having to take in order to remain in control of her own body. Isabella had only ever wanted to get out of room so much once in her life back in her old pack, but yet she forced herself to stay. If anything else was to be said, even though she didn't want to, she needed to hear it. Why are you here, Leila? He repeats before adding a threat shortly afterwards. And I'm warning you, get to the point or I will personally walk you right off of this pack land and you will not be coming back. I am not joking like Dad would, I mean it. Well, speaking of mates, she spits here, eyes looking as though they were on fire through anger. I have found mine. I wanted you to meet him. She smiles sweetly, either to fool them in forgetting what she had said minutes ago or because she was thinking about her mate. Isabella could now see why Hunter had such distaste in his sister, but she kept her feet firmly planted on the ground. She couldn't see why Leila cared about what Hunter would think of her mate. She was clearly a very independent private girl who didn't share much with her family, not to mention she seemed set on destruction of her brother and the pack. Why would you care what I think? He asks, raising his eyebrows as he voices what Isabella is thinking. So you could see how real mates act. She teases with a large smirk on her face, but when Hunter growls angrily at her, she holds her hands up in defense. Joke. she simply says before standing up and heading to the door. Jackson puts his foot in front of the door so she can't get out, but she just narrows her eyes at him. "Move, dog." Jackson growls before closing his eyes to calm himself down by counting to 10, but he does eventually move, so she opens the door, but before she can leave she turns back around. "Dinner. 8 p.m. I'll text you the address. I'd love to see you both there and no doubt you standing on guard," she says confidently to them all. With one fleeting glance at all of them she leaves the room, slamming the door on her exit. "Jackson, do you mind?" Hunter starts, but Jackson had a smile on his face. "Already going, boss," he says, his smile growing. There is a smile of friendship, but it is also sympathy for the both of them. He knows, just like the both of them, that what Leila had just said could turn things ugly. "Bella," Hunter whispers with pleading eyes. Despite being angry at him, Isabella couldn't help but feel a shiver run down her spine as his nickname that she had come to love so much rolled off his tongue. "I don't want to hear it, Hunter," she replies, looking to the floor. She desperately wants to tell him everything's okay about the two of them, but also his sister in general, because she could still feel the anger radiating from him. "Don't hear it then, please just come here, I need you, Bella," he mutters. Isabella glances up at her suddenly weak-looking mate, and she seems to lose control of her legs as she is walking to the other side of the desk into his open arms. Hunter pulls Isabella onto his lap, where she curls up in his arms with a content sigh. Just for a couple of minutes so they could pretend like nothing had happened. Hunter presses his face into the crook of Isabella's neck. He greedily takes in deep breaths to take in her intoxicating scent, which instantly starts to calm him down. After a couple of peaceful minutes, Isabella sits up, to which both wolves whine in their owners' heads. "You're not forgiven," she says with hurt-laden eyes. "I don't expect to be," he sighs with a small smile, one similar to the one Isabella had given Leila before. "And this dinner tonight," she starts, but Hunter presses his fingers to her soft lips to stop her. He pauses for a minute as his mind is clouded over with the thought of just kissing her there and now, but he shakes his head to get rid of it. "You don't need to come, I don't expect you to," Hunter says, his index finger running across Isabella's plump bottom lip, which is equally as distracting to her as it is to him. "I wish you'd shut up," she grins playfully. "I was going to say, what should I wear?" The truth was, Isabella was going to tell Hunter that she didn't want to go. No, she was going to tell him she wasn't going whether he liked it or not, but when he gave her the choice she changed her mind. A choice was something Isabella was never given, so for Hunter to give her that freedom she wanted to go because she had chosen that decision. It had taken a long time, but Isabella had realized that she was Hunter's mate. There was no changing that, not that she wanted to. So she had to get on with it and accept him for his flaws like he would her, and she had believed she had plenty for him to accept, including her past. Being mates to Hunter also meant she was powerful. More powerful than she could ever have thought of a few short months ago. But for them both to be this powerful, they needed each other. Isabella had to stand by her mate even in the worst times, even if it was just a dinner with his sister and her mate. Despite this, he still wasn't forgiven. 17. Isabella had looked through her new wardrobe that she didn't even know she had. There had been too many dresses to count for her to make her way through, but she didn't want to look too flashy. Some of the dresses were for balls. Floor-length ball gowns that Isabella still couldn't grasp were hers. Well, she couldn't believe anything here was hers, but they were. In the end, she had chosen a white, almost off-the-shoe dress that looked quite plain, but there was black lace detailing at the bottom that gave it a beautiful, intricate touch that Isabella loved, and though it was very much like her, she came across as plain, but there was something about her that made Hunter love her. Isabella put it with some black pumps, which were also very plain, but Isabella didn't particularly like to stand out, so this outfit was perfect. Despite Isabella thinks she looked on the plain side when she came across Hunter, his jaw dropped open. He was at a loss for words, which made her blush incredibly hard, making her wish that the floor would just open up and eat her. "You look amazing," is all Hunter manages to say. "Thank you," she giggles, still feeling incredibly awkward. Isabella couldn't help giggling like a schoolgirl when she looked at Hunter in his suit. She also had a few choice words she wanted to say to him, but it might not have been appropriate. Where had this girl come from? When they had finally parked up outside the restaurant, there was an uneasy feeling in Isabella's stomach. She couldn't decide why she was feeling like that. It could be the day's events, because Isabella had been thinking about it all day. And maybe now it was just catching up with her? I could be because they were on ground that no pack owned in every country. There was at least on area that no one could own, so if there were disagreements it could settled in one of these areas without fear of being ambushed. For somewhere that was so free of werewolves, There were many werewolf rules put in place by Hunter's ancestors, such as no physical fighting could take place in these areas. It would be run by humans, so it was a fully functioning town, which was one of the reasons why there were so many rules. Werewolves didn't actually want to hurt humans, they wouldn't purposely protect them, unless there was reason to do so, but they didn't want to kill a human for no reason, so by having a human town there had to be no fighting, so no innocents died. B. The biggest rule of being a werewolf was not to expose yourself to humans, so by having a human town that had no one who owned it, no werewolves could fight because that would expose them. Punishments for this is unspeakable. It hasn't happened in so long many people don't know what would happen. It was almost a rule that all this land was owned by Hunter and his family, even though it was technically unowned by anyone, but the difference was that if Hunter did anything in this land that exposed him to the humans, for example, then he could be stripped of his title, whereas if he exposed himself to a human on werewolf land because he was royalty, it could be fixed without another word. This wasn't the case with normal werewolves. Even on their territory, if they told a human without good reason, they would be punished. This was why it was so important that whatever happened at this dinner, Hunter had to keep his cool no matter what Leila or her mate said. It was another main reason why Isabella decided to go to the meeting. She knew she was the only person who could keep him calm. Remember, Isabella said, getting ready to tell Hunter yet again that he had to keep his cool. Not to let the humans know, he says in a monotonous voice. Not only had he heard this from Isabella numerous times on the what seemed like forever journey, but he had it drummed into him by his mother and father as he was growing up, even though he didn't visit land like this until he was 19, as it was rarely needed or used. Yes, she smiles. They both take a deep breath before the door is opened and they take a step out. As they walk to the door, everything is okay. Hunter had his hand wrapped around Isabella's for comfort at the scenarios he is creating in his head that could happen tonight. It isn't until the door to the restaurant is opened that a smell that fills Isabella's nose that makes her stop in her tracks, like she has just walked into a brick wall. Shit, Jackson mutters under his breath as he has to stop suddenly too behind Isabella as he nearly walks right into her. Bella! In the air, there are smells of amazing foods that usually would leave Isabella drooling at the thought of eating all she could, but now they were just making her feel queasy, along with that familiar smell that Hunter and Jackson had already forgotten, but she never would. Isabella? Hunter says in a worried tone. He notices the worry etched on Isabella's face but doesn't know why. Isabella didn't live anywhere near here, so it was extremely unlikely that she would have visited. Stop being stupid, Isabella told herself before snapping out of her trance-like state. Are you okay? Hunter asks apprehensively. Fine, Isabella lies with an overdramatic smile, but Hunter is too happy to see her with some sort of smile on her face to notice how fake it is. Isabella catches Jackson narrowing his eyes at her, but she just shrugs at him and follows Hunter into the building, even though she had a familiar feeling of wanting to run away. 18. It isn't confirmed for Isabella that it's him by seeing him. It is Hunter who tightens his hold on her hand. Finn. No, he growls. Isabella feels the color drain from her face, but she still has the common sense to squeeze his hand back to remind him she's here, not with him, and he needs to keep his cool. Hey bro, come sit, Leila grins, only managing to take her eyes off of her mate for a couple of seconds before returning to look at him lovingly. He is not your mate, Hunter yells before storming over to the table, dragging Isabella with him. What do you mean? She says, a look of confusion shooting across her face. I suggest you sit down, wouldn't want anyone finding out that you're a werewolf. He whispers the last word, but the smirk on his face tells everyone that he would love nothing more. Hunter turns his back on the couple at the table. It is clear that one party loves the other much more, and Isabella actually felt bad for Leila. No matter what someone does, they don't deserve to be played by their own mate, which was what was clearly happening here. After taking a couple deep breaths, Hunter looks into Isabella's eyes with still darker eyes than usual. You go wait in the car, I won't be here long, he smiles shakily. It's almost as fake as the one Isabella just gave. No, I can wait it out, and I need to make sure you don't do anything stupid, she whispers, reaching out to run the pad of her thumb against his cheek. If she had done that under normal circumstances, he might have growled happily, but it just managed to calm him down. Hunter himself knew that it was best to keep Isabella by his side, so he could make sure that Finn and his brothers hadn't planned a surprise attack, and he knew she kept him calm even at the worst times, which was good in this environment. Anytime it gets too much, you tell me, Hunter says with raised eyebrows. He sighs slightly happier when she nods to confirm she will. They walk over to the table and sit down. They are rigid and tense, whereas the couple across from them are slumped in their seats and all over each other. It's hard for Isabella and Hunter how Layla can't see that Finn isn't really interested in her, but sometimes people are blinded from the truth when they really love their mate even if it doesn't go both ways. Right, well, here I am and I don't approve, Hunter says, putting his hands into fists. You're just not happy that I'm happy, Layla replies, shaking her head. I'd love to be happy, but that won't happen with him. He is using you, Hunter says, leaning closer to his sister. You know nothing about James, she says, smiling lovingly over at him. Isabella's jaw drops. James? Layla, his name is Finn. His brother is the alpha to my old pack. Finn is a horrible man who is completely dangerous. You need to get away, Isabella warns with sad eyes. She knew the bad things he could do, and as much as she disliked Layla, nobody should have to deal with the likes of Finn. He really is a monster if one should ever exist. James is rogue and has been for a number of years. His old pack kicked him out unfairly after his mother and father died in a tragic fire. We've only known each other a short time, but he told me everything. Why would he lie about that? Why would you lie about that? She says, the hurt clear in narrowed eyes. You spin a good tale, James. Hunter spits, barely able to say his name. I don't know what you have against me, sir, but I am innocent to these lies too, he says with innocent-looking eyes. But when Layla looks away from him to her brother, shaking her head, the smirk on Finn's face comes back. I'm going to kill you, Hunter growls. A couple people look around, but he is so angry he doesn't even notice. Calm down, Hunter, Isabella mutters, placing a hand onto one of his thighs. That, along with hearing his name fall from her tongue, instantly does make him feel calmer, but he is too angry for it to work fully. Yes, Hunter, calm down. I already told you we don't want anyone here to find out about our condition, Finn says, raising his eyebrows, not taking the chance to say werewolf, as there is a waitress a couple of feet away. And we wouldn't want you stripped of your title for me and you sister to have to take over. He smirks, licking his lips. Hunter's eyes widen with fear. It has clicked that all this time Finn has been using his sister to get a reaction out of him. That's why they wanted to meet here, where there are such harsh rules, because one wrong move and the title would automatically fall to Layla and her mate, which is what he wanted. He would be Werewolf King and there would be nothing Hunter or Isabella could do about it. Layla's eyes also widen with fear. This wasn't the plan. She didn't want to be queen. She was happy with her princess role. She fit it well. All Layla had ever wanted to do was to find her mate and settle down happily away from the shadow of her brother. Layla was very misunderstood. She had created an image for herself where she went against all the rules. She had told everyone she didn't want a mate because she knew this would get people talking and give her attention because it was against the ordinary, but really this was all she wanted. Not a fancy crown and a title, but once Layla had started with the role, she found it harder and harder to drop it. After every lie, insult and bad action happened, so she continued to do it. Even Layla knew that was rightfully her brother's, but wanting to stick by her mate, she smothered the fear like a flame so she could seem confident in what her mate was saying. We're leaving, Hunter said, grabbing Isabella's hand. He led her out to the car and told her to get in. He left Jackson with her before he walked back into the restaurant. Despite Isabella trying to scramble out the car, Jackson stopped her. He said, I had to stop you at all costs. The best thing you can do is get in and put your belt on, Jackson says with his second sympathetic smile of the day. Isabella could also see that whatever Hunter was doing, Jackson felt that it was stupid. Hunter, get off me. Isabella heard a scream, and looking in the direction of the restaurant, she noticed that Hunter had thrown Layla over his should and was carrying her to the car at a fast pace. Jackson, start the car. Isabella, move. Hunter growled at the kicking in his stomach. His harsh tone had made Isabella physically flinch, but Jackson was so used to it he just nodded and ran to the driver's side. Crawling into the car, Isabella buckled up her seatbelt before peering out of the window, where Finn was now running out of the restaurant after the car. But just as he was, Hunter had slammed the door shut and Jackson had set off. Now came the battle of keeping Layla calm, not to mention Isabella knew she would have to tell Layla and Hunter things from her past that she swore to herself never to talk about again.